Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Review Diaries. I am your host, Jackie Moore, and this week we are doing a book review. I have a little bit of a different setup this week. I'm trying to see if it works. I'm still trying to figure this out. Like I said, we are in our first couple of episodes, so just bear with me while I figure out how to navigate through this all on my own. But this week I wanted to talk about a book that I finished recently, and that is The 7-Year-Slip by Ashley Poston. And this is, I believe, her second book already, and I had already read The Dead Romantics last year, and it was one of my favorite books of the year. I think I rated it 5 stars, so I'm definitely gonna have to read it again. And she's coming near my area this year because she has another book coming out, and I'm gonna try and see if I can get tickets to meet her because I just love her stuff. I'm already going next month to meet another author to the same library in my area, so I don't know, I'll see if I can still buy tickets to meet Ashley because I just love her stuff and I'm a huge fan, and this book did not disappoint whatsoever. But to get into the book, this is basically if you've not read any of Ashley's books previously, she deals a lot with grief in her books, but she does it in a very beautiful, poetic way. It's not anything super sad and depressing. If anything, it's hopeful, and I do actually really enjoy that take because it just, I don't know, it's very relatable, and she writes it in a very real and raw and honest way, which I really appreciate when it comes to those kinds of topics in a book, just because it can quickly take a very dark and depressing turn. So writing a fun book with strong characters and romance entwined with dealing with their own traumas and grief is just fun. And the book begins with our main character, Clementine, and I just love that name. I don't know why. I think it's just such an adorable and cute name. But we have Clementine, who is in her late 20s. She's 29, 28, I think, when the book starts. And she is a senior publicist, and she lives in New York City. And she works for Strauss and Adder, which is I guess a fictional book publisher. But she has been working there for the past 7 years or so, and she is kind of at a crossroads in her life after experiencing the loss of her aunt 6 months prior. And her aunt was a very important figure in her life. She was very instrumental in her childhood, and they kind of always went out on these adventures all around the world, and her aunt meant a lot to her. And she, in her will, the aunt gave her apartment in New York City. Also, the book begins with a story that her aunt had told her, basically saying that the apartment that she now lives in is magical, and we don't really learn how exactly the apartment is magical until later, but it's kind of hinted from the very beginning of the book that there's magical elements in this story. But basically, Clementine is at a restaurant with her friends Fiona and Drew, who also work at the book publisher with her, and the chef of the restaurant that they are at is somebody that they're trying to pursue for a potential opportunity because he's a up-and-coming rising star, I guess, and a very popular chef currently, and they are trying to pursue him because their book publisher does cookbooks and travel nonfiction, and he's just very popular right now, and they want to see if they can work with him. And they are discussing an article that he wrote in a magazine some years ago, and they're just talking about it and how he writes and everything, and they're kind of telling Clementine to just check it out and see what she thinks and see if there's a potential opportunity there for them to, I don't know, work with him or something. As they're at dinner, they're kind of catching up and gossiping, and they ask Clementine about her now ex-boyfriend Nate, and she tells him oh, we broke up, we're not together anymore. And basically she kind of goes into why they broke up, basically, and she recalls the last major fight that she had with her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend, where basically he just tells her that she is just very closed off, too focused on her work, and he just didn't feel like he was important in her life anymore. And they had only been dating for like 3 months or so. And he tells her basically that she is not the same person anymore that he met. And she is going through a lot in her life. She feels very lost with the loss of her aunt, and then just in her career, she kind of doesn't really know what she wants to do, if she wants to stay in this position or try and find something else. She just kind of is like, I don't know, she's struggling a lot and she doesn't really know what to do. And she kind of, anything that kind of meant anything to her and that she had a passion about doesn't mean like anything to her anymore. She used to love to paint, and she has not painted like in the longest time, and she is kind of just going through life basically, like just in survival mode, not really like living. So as her friends are trying to figure out a way to get the chef to have a conversation with them to just do a pitch or something, Clementine gets a message from work basically saying that author that they are working with is having like a travel emergency, and that's kind of her job basically, and she has to leave. And so as she is getting up to leave, she like slams into somebody, and it's like a waiter. They had ordered like dessert. Previously they had ordered like this lemon pie, and he was holding the dessert as she like crashes into him, and it just like literally goes everywhere. And he calls her Lemon as they like collide basically, but she doesn't react to the name. But she does note that there's like this familiar feeling when he like was grabbing onto her basically, and she's kind of like, well, why does it feel like so familiar when he's like, when I'm like in his arms basically, kind of thing, as if they had like known each other previously. So the next day at work, we meet Clementine's boss, Rhonda, who is the co-publisher of Straus and Adder, and she is also the director of marketing and publicity for the publisher. And Clementine basically says that Rhonda is who she aspires to be, basically someone who has goals and knew exactly what she wanted out of life and what she needed to achieve that. And they are in Rhonda's office, and Rhonda makes a comment basically that Clementine takes this annual trip every year at the end of the summer with her aunt, and she always asks for this time off, but she notices that she had rescinded the annual like request for the weekly vacation for the summer. And Clementine basically says that she's not going, and that she has to work, and that her job is like a good distraction from her grief, and that it kind of allows her to not focus on her grief or anything else, which is a very relatable feeling. And then her boss tells her that her request to rescind the vacation time has been denied, and she also reveals to her that she is retiring at the end of the summer, and that she wants Clementine to take some time off just because she is going to recommend her to take over part of her position. So we end the day with Clementine back in the apartment, and she basically like gets home and she just falls asleep. And then she is awoken by like a hand on her shoulder, and she's kind of like drowsily like waking up, and then she sees this man in his mid-20s in the apartment. So she starts like freaking out, like throwing stuff at him. She's like, get out of my apartment, blah 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 blah. And the guy's like, no, I literally like, I have a key, my stuff is in the bedroom, like I talked to your aunt, my name is so and so, I have a note from her like right here if you want to see. So he hands her the note, and it's basically in her aunt's handwriting. So and so is going to stay here for the summer, like if you take care of Mother and Fucker, which are two pigeons that live like basically on the balcony of her apartment. And then she's like, P.S. if Clementine stops by, just tell her that you'll be like subletting for me. And then the note also mentions the elderly neighbor, Mrs. Norris, who had previously passed away like 3 years ago basically, and that she could like be wandering the halls, but she has been dead for 3 years. And so Clementine's like, well, you can't sublet the apartment like any summer that you want. But he tells her that he spoke to her last week about it. And she's like, that is not freaking funny. Get out of my apartment. So he's like, okay, yeah, I'll leave. Like, it's fine. I'm sorry. I'll get my stuff and go. So as he is packing up his stuff, she kind of notices that the apartment is like a lot more colorful than it was previously. It just has like more life to it. The sun is like streaming in like a little bit more, and then obviously the furniture is different. It has like some of her aunt's old stuff laid out. None of her like boxes are there. She had kind of started to unpack but not quite finished, and her stuff is like nowhere. And then the chair that is in the corner of the apartment, it's a like big blue chair that her aunt had, is there like in the apartment, and it's the one that her aunt actually like died in. And so she starts like panicking, and she's like, I need some freaking air, I don't know what's going on. So he's like, okay, like are you like okay, do you need like water or whatever? And she's like, no, I just need some air. And so he proceeds to go to open the window, and she's like, no, don't open the window. And then the two pigeons that are out there on the balcony, they just like swoop in. So one of them kind of like sits on the counter, just kind of there, and then another one gets into her hair and starts like attacking her basically. And so she's like screaming like, get out of my hair, like help me, blah 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 blah. And then he kind of gently tries to like grab it, and then he's like, what do I do with it? And she's like, throw it outside. So he lets it out the window, and then she's like, okay, you need to leave like right now. So he does. So as she's leaving the apartment, she kind of remembers what her aunt had told her about the apartment, and that it can basically bend time unexpectedly. And basically you will be in the present in the hallway, and then as soon as you open the door, it'll slip back 7 years in time, and it'll just be like random. And so her aunt had told her kind of when it had first happened, when she moved in, she was much younger, and then she was coming back from like getting groceries one time or something, and then she opened the door and the apartment was like filled with furniture, and then there was this like random woman in the apartment. So her aunt like goes to the superintendent of the building to get this woman out basically. And so they come back to the apartment, and then they open the door and nobody's there, and like the furniture's gone, the person's gone. So the aunt's like kind of like, okay, like that was weird, I might have just like stepped into the wrong apartment, I don't know. And then she doesn't see the woman again for like a few months or something. And so some time passes, and she kind of starts to make the apartment her own, basically like decorate it, have its own furniture, that kind of thing. But one time she like kind of slips out to get the mail, and then she comes back and she is in the same apartment with that lady previously. And so we learned that her name is Vera, and Vera is like very excited to see her. She's like, oh my god, you're back, like that's great. So Vera tells Clementine's aunt that the apartment is magical and that it can slip back in time randomly. So they start to get to know one another, and then they slowly start to bond and fall in love. And her aunt, kind of as time passes and things get like more difficult between them and everything, and more intense, she eventually tries to find her in the present, but they kind of realize that they wanted different things out of life, so they had to sadly let go of one another. Clementine comes back to the apartment, and the stranger is not there, but it is still 7 years in the past, so it still has like all of her aunt's stuff in it. And she basically steps out of the apartment and is like repeatedly closing and opening the door in hopes that it will slip back into the present. And then the 6th time that she does it, she bumps into the guy basically as he is like stepping out, and he reassures her that he's leaving, but that he just forgot his toothbrush basically. So they talk a little bit, and then she learns that he is from North Carolina, and she starts thinking about her aunt and how basically in this timeline in the apartment she is still alive, and that kind of gives her like a little bit of hope basically that she might get to see her aunt sometime. And then she decides to let the guy stay, and so he's very ecstatic about it, and he thanks her. So he offers to cook dinner for her, and he introduces himself as Iwan, and then it's like IWAN, so I don't know if it's Iwan, Iwan, it's just Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, but I never heard that name before. And so as Iwan is making dinner, Clementine kind of learns a little bit about his life and how he had planned to go to law school like his mom and his sister, but he dropped out because he kind of figured out that that's not what he wanted to do with his life. So he had worked in a couple of restaurants kind of trying to figure out his life, and he kind of realized that that was the only place that he ever really felt at home. So he decides to go to the Culinary Institute of America, and he got an associate's degree there. So he is now in New York City trying to get a job as a dishwasher in a famous restaurant in hopes of kind of just climbing the ranks basically once he's in there. And he is 26 years old in this timeline. So he asks about her life in return, and she tells him basically that she went to NYU to study art history, and then she just started in book publishing. So she kind of debates telling him more about her life basically, but stops herself because people usually tend to think that she has like a wild spirit because of all the travel that she's done, and she doesn't want him to judge her. She wants him to get to know her like for who she is. He kind of tells her like, no, you're like selling yourself short, like don't do that. And then she's kind of like she like plays it off basically. And then he asks about like her aunt and how she is, if they're close, and that kind of snaps her back into reality, and that she realizes that her aunt is like actually dead in her lifetime. So she tries to play it off, and he notices this like look that she gets on her face basically, and he tells her that it's like she's trying to, or acting as she's surprised that she wants to cry. So she plays it off again, and he jokingly nicknames her Lemon, which I thought was literally the most adorable like nickname ever, in the way that he just explains it basically. It's just so cute. So as they're eating dinner, they're kind of getting to know each other like a little bit more, and then he begins to talk about his passion for cooking, which Clementine is just so attracted to. He talks about like his grandfather and why he's the reason that he like loved to cook basically, but that he was never really and that he was never really able to open up his own restaurant, and that he now unfortunately has dementia. The way that food is described in this book is just low-key, like it made me hungry like so many times, because it's just described in like so much amazing detail, and it just makes you like my mouth just like watered sometimes when she was like describing stuff in the book. And it also says a lot about Iwan as a character too. He just has like so much passion for what he does, and he's just so animated when he talks about cooking. So it kind of, to me, makes him seem like more relatable and real. And then Clementine says that his joy for cooking was just infectious, and that it just made her like ache to feel that kind of joy again in life basically, since she hadn't for so long. And so he says a lot in the book that he is constantly trying to achieve the quote-unquote perfect meal, which is defined basically by the experience but not really the food itself. And he asks her like what made her want to be a book publicist, and she kind of says that she just fell into it basically. She said that she loved books, but specifically travel books, but she never really wanted to be an art curator, and that she just naturally happened to be a good book publicist, so she kind of stayed in that field. And I think that's a really relatable feeling. At least I know that I have felt that way sometimes. Like you may have like dreams and aspirations for things that you like, and then you kind of try, and then things don't really work out. Maybe people have more talent than you do, and you kind of maybe fall into things you never really thought you would, that you end up loving unexpectedly. So, or vice versa. And I think it's just funny how life works like that sometimes. And I think it's really great to see how open and honest they are with one another, like so early on too. They just kind of get one another. I mean, I know they're on different timelines basically, but they were kind of going through the same journey, trying to figure out like their lives basically, and they're at kind of similar points so they can understand the other's perspective, which I thought was a nice touch. And so they keep talking a little bit, and then they suddenly hear like violin music coming from the vents in the apartment, and it is coming from Mrs. Norris' apartment, which is the neighbor that had died in Clementine's like current timeline. So he extends his hand out to her so she can dance with him, and after some consideration she just kind of takes his hand and they begin dancing. So they have this little moment, and she's like conflicted just because she knows like what can happen if she develops feelings for him and how complicated things like could get basically in the future. And so she kind of like panics, and so as they break apart they kind of are just like, okay, let's just like go to bed. And then he sleeps shirtless, so he is in bed. They kind of decide that they'll just sleep in the aunt's bed, like it's whatever. And she notices that he has like all these tattoos, so she tries once again to leave the apartment like she had previously, but this time to go back to her timeline. And she keeps like opening and closing the door again, and she just can't do it basically. So she gives up and she goes to bed. So the next night at dinner, Iwan learns that Clementine likes to paint, and he asks to see her work, but she says that it's private and that it's for her basically, that why she does it. And he says that cooking used to be like that for him, and that she said that she stopped painting because someone broke her heart basically. So we know that that's her aunt, but he thinks that it's like maybe some previous relationship that she had. So they are eating frozen pizza for dinner, and he gets her to help him to make meringue for this lemon meringue pie, because that's like not his specialty, I guess. He can't really like do it well. So the recipe was his like grandfather's, and they have this little moment, and he asks to kiss her and she consents to it. So they have this like super like magical romantic kiss, and it's like incredible. And so as things start to get more heated between them, she stops him, and so she apologizes like profusely. She's like, I'm so sorry, blah 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 blah. And he is just he is comforting to her. He is just sweet and understanding, and he just is incredible. He's just this soft, precious, understanding man, and it's just beautiful until he tells her that there's like nothing that she needs to apologize for, and then she talks about this like hollow pit that she feels in her stomach basically because she can't reveal the truth to him about the apartment and everything, and that she wished that they had met 7 years prior and not in this timeline where she just felt like so broken and lost. And so the next day at work, she is completely just distracted by thoughts of this man. Like she cannot focus on literally anything. And she even tells her friend Fiona that she met somebody at the apartment, but she doesn't reveal like much. She just tells him like his name and that they met there. And so after work, she goes back to the apartment, and it stays in her timeline, so he is not there, which is disappointing to her. And again, she tries to do the whole thing of like closing and opening the door again just to see, and nothing happens. Time kind of keeps passing, and the apartment just stays the same. Like she doesn't bump into him again, and even though she tries to find him like in her own timeline, it's just unsuccessful. So it is now summertime. It's about a month and a half after their first meeting, and she is with her friend Drew, who reveals that they got this proposal for a book, and that this chef James Ashton is from the restaurant that they were previously at. It's called the Olive Branch, and that he is coming to the office to meet everyone tomorrow. Clementine is tasked to help everyone with the presentation and to just help get the proposal like sorted. So Drew tells Clementine that she has to read this article, or start by reading this article by James Ashton that he wrote in this food magazine. So she starts reading the article and she notices that the writing in it has like a lot of similarities, and she has this familiar feeling as far as the writing and the descriptions go, and then just the passion behind the article itself. And then she notices a picture in the article, and it is Iwan, but he is just older. He's like in his mid-30s. So we learn about his like backstory and what he has done in the past 7 years since they had initially like first met. So he had started as a dishwasher and was doing that for about a month and a half before being promoted to a line cook. And then he became a sous chef a year later. And then the head chef that he was working under in a restaurant was retiring, and he had been kind of taken under the wing of the head chef. And he had handed control over to Iwan for the restaurant, which was the Olive Branch. And so in this current timeline also, Iwan is working on getting his own restaurant started. She is running late to the meeting next morning, and she talks about how she had this like whole plan laid out of what she was going to do, say if she like met him and they recognize each other, that kind of thing. And basically like when she sees him, like that whole plan is just out the door. So much about him like was different when she first sees him. He has this like different aura about him. He obviously looks older, but so much about him was the same also. And he does like notice her when she walks in the room, but doesn't say anything. So throughout the meeting, they kind of act like they don't know each other, and she is like internally like freaking out, thinking of like what she's going to say to him, how she's gonna like handle working with him potentially, and it's just kind of tripping her out. So they talk about their presentation for the book and his proposal for or vision for the book, and it kind of takes her back and says that it feels a bit out of touch and that it lacked the passion that he had so much for it for cooking. And even when they had cooked together in the apartment, he just had like this innate passion for it that was lacking in his proposal. He kind of tells her like, you look like you have something to say, and she's like, nope, that's just my face. But as he is leaving the meeting with his like team or whatever, he addresses her with the nickname Lemon, and she is kind of like shell-shocked. So some days after that meeting, her friend Drew reveals that their proposal was rejected. So she thinks that it's because of her, basically, and like the history that they had. So back in the apartment, Iwan is there, and he greets her happily, and she's just like very shocked to see him since it's been a while, and he's also like younger, and she just met his older self. They have dinner again, and he reveals that he got the dishwashing job at the restaurant that he wanted. And she talks about what is going on at work with his quote unquote future self, but he doesn't tell him that it's his future self. And she kind of realizes what she needs to do to convince his future self. So she kind of kisses him in excitement that he helped her like figure that out, and she heads over to the restaurant. And so while she's there, she's kind of struggling a little bit to get into the kitchen, like both with the staff and just in general. They're not allowing her to see him, but she manages to get in, but they're like about to kick her out when he comes in to speak with her, and she asks him if he rejected their proposal because of her. And so he's like, well, do you think it would have been a good idea for us to work together? And that he thought that she would have been the one to not want to work with him, but he said that he would talk to his agent to see if like they could actually work together. The next day, Clementine is at work, and she gets a package in the mail from her aunt that must have gotten like lost in the mail, and so she doesn't open it, and she just throws it away in the trash. And then we learn that her aunt died by suicide. And I really appreciated how this part of the book was written, because it's done in a very gentle but beautiful way. Just when talking about suicide, I think it's such a sensitive topic that affects a lot of people, and I just really appreciate it. I thought it was very poetic. Just being somebody that has experienced loss in my own way, it kind of gave a different perspective to loss that I have not experienced, but I know that it will touch so many people too. And it was such a raw moment that kind of tied into the acknowledgments in the book that I read at the end. I just loved seeing this perspective. I thought it was just raw and beautiful and just very open and honest, and I don't know, it was hard to read, but I really liked it. And I think loss and grief can be experienced in so many different ways by so many different people, and it affects people differently. So it was a really nice touch. I'm going to differentiate current male character and past male character by their names. So I'm going to call present one James, and then the one in the past timeline Ewan, just because I think it fits differently, and she also addresses them like that way in the book too. I don't know why, but she does. But basically James and his agents are hosting this event at the Olive Branch with all of the potential publishers, and it is a cooking class. So Clementine kind of notices how different James is acting in this setting. He is, he's nice and personable, but he is kind of guarded. He's not very outright showing his passion as openly as he did with her. She says that he doesn't seem as enthusiastic or passionate about what he is talking about, but just more technical, and he is trying to impress people more than anything. And so she says that the class was fun, and they end up making ravioli, and somehow Clementine and her friends' raviolis end up looking like vaginas, which was funny. And then she also kind of says that she doesn't remember the last time she had this much fun at work, and that she now just felt like her job was basically her planning how to give it to other people, and her planning out other people's adventures and their lives, and that it just did not seem as fun for her anymore. So after the event, everyone is gone, and Clementine is waiting for her Uber, her taxi, and then James comes up and he invites her to get food because he thinks that they might have gotten off on the wrong foot. So they just agree to go to this fajita truck that his friend owns. So as they were walking there, he asks her again about her aunt, and she reveals to him the truth that she had passed away 6 months ago. So he apologizes and says that he's sorry for her loss, and they kind of keep talking, catch up basically, and there's some flirtation there, even though if it's a bit awkward because they're trying to kind of figure out how to be around each other in this current timeline. So they come up to the food truck, which happens to be Ewan's friends, Miguel and Isa, and she notices how different he is around his friends. He's just more lively and open and just fun in comparison to how he was in the conference room in the class. So she asks about he feels about leaving the restaurant and kind of starting off on his own, and he says that he's kind of worked so hard to get there that there's no point in him stopping. She says that his grandfather would have been proud of him, and then he tells her that he passed away 7 years ago after he had gotten his own place in New York. She then asks him why he never tried to find her after all these years, and he says that she wouldn't have believed him anyway. And then his friends Miguel and Isa eventually join them, and we get to know more about James, and then just his personality too, and his journey with culinary school, and then his friends. They also revealed that he was kind of crushing hard, like obsessed, I guess, with a girl basically when he had first moved to New York, and it turns out that it was Clementine. So as they're walking back, they have this kind of moment after the revelation that he had kind of had feelings for her in the past, and she is hesitant about it, and he is hesitant to try and kiss her or like pull a move on her or anything, and says that they are basically always in the wrong time. So back in the apartment, she is transported back 7 years with the younger Iwan in the apartment. So they kiss and things get intense. So she, as they're like kind of kissing, making out, she counts and finds all 10 tattoos that he has by kissing them. And so she realizes that she is breaking her aunt's like 2 rules from the apartment, which one of them was never leave your shoes by the door, and the second one is never fall in love in the apartment, because she tells him that she likes him, and then they end up having sex. I mean, it's a fade to black closed door trope as far as the sex goes, but it is implied that they do the next morning. The next morning, he tells her that they should go out together and just like explore New York, basically. So she kind of panics because she doesn't know what it's going to mean if they leave the apartment together, like if they're even going to be in the present timeline, in the past, what's going to happen basically once they step out. So she kind of tries to stop him from doing that, and as he opens the door to leave with her and he's holding her hand, he literally freaking vanishes, and she is now in her present timeline. And I just was shook that he just like up and vanished like a ghost. I was like but she tries to go back in time again, but is unsuccessful like always. So she just kind of decides to go along with her day and run errands. So she opens her mailbox and finds this letter from Vera, who is the lady that her aunt had met previously in the apartment and fell in love with. So she calls her friends for an emergency meeting and tells them about the letter from Vera and tells them like the connection to her aunt. And then they are at the fajita truck getting food, and James is there too. So they begin kind of talking, flirting a little bit, and then he notices that she has a hickey on her neck as he is brushing her hair away from her neck. And he plays off his reaction by joking that she must have had like a good night after he left last night. And she was like, yeah, it was amazing. It was like really hot. And then he's kind of like, and then he realizes that she is talking about him. So he gets frustrated and he's like, you can't be doing that. It's been so long for me. And asks if this was like basically her way of getting back with him for rejecting her last night. And she says no, but this moment when he like, I was like, this is so, it was just so hot that he was like, you think that I don't remember what you like, you think that I don't remember like everything about you, how you feel, how you smell, and that I like love the way you blush, and it just drives me crazy. Obviously it gets a little bit more PG-13 than that, but I was like literally just man, these bookmen, I tell you, they just written by women, I tell you, it's such a real thing. And I just, oh man. But anyway, after this, Clementine's friends join her as she is going to talk to Vera about the letter that she got, and they stay behind on the sidewalk for like moral support, basically waiting for her. And when she makes her way up, she is greeted by her, and she is just very emotional in the beginning just because she is so like open and warm to her, and she basically knows that her aunt has talked to Vera about her, and that they had stayed in contact like all this time. So Clementine tells Vera that her aunt Annalie I don't know how you say it, had died 6 months ago. And this moment is kind of the first one where we see the grief and the realization like really hit Clementine, with the fact that her aunt's not like coming back, and that she is going to miss out on all these things as far as her life and all the adventures that they could have had that they aren't going to anymore. And it's very emotional. They're like both crying. And after that moment, as Clementine is leaving, she notices this picture, and it's of Annalie's children, and one of them is actually Iwan. And she kind of notices the joy on his face in the picture. It's a picture of him with his grandfather, and they are cooking, and she thinks about like kind of maybe when that joy kind of stopped for him, or when he quit feeling like that. And so we are now at James's restaurant soft opening, and Clementine bumps into Vera, and then she meets James's sister, and she notices the atmosphere in the restaurant is so unlike who Iwan is as a person. The chairs are like uncomfortable, the menu is kind of pretentious, it's too bright in the room, and it just doesn't feel like how Iwan has described cooking and what he wants in a restaurant. Basically everything about the restaurant was like quote unquote perfect, but it was not who he was as a person, and it was kind of as if he had done it this way to just try and impress people, and not out of the love and passion that he had for everything. So it's as if losing his grandfather had kind of made him like lose his passion or lose sight of that, and that he was only doing it to somehow just still make him proud. It wasn't like out of love for it. So Clementine is kind of emotional at this, and she excuses herself from the table, and James bumps into her and they start talking. So they have this like tough conversation. He asks her like why she doesn't call him Iwan, and why she doesn't like the restaurant. I mean, he says that this is all that he has worked for, but she doesn't want him to lose sight of who he is as a person, and that he is very out of touch with everything that he was, which I thought was shitty for her to say. That was rough. And he says that he is still himself, but if he were just a dishwasher, that nobody would be here doing any of this or pursuing any opportunities with him, including her, which is true. And that he is still trying to make his grandfather proud and pursuing the perfect meal, blah blah blah. When she says that it was his grandfather that made it like the perfect meal, it's kind of like a slap in the face to him. And he says that instead of her wanting him to be the person that he was 7 years ago, that she maybe needs to allow for change to happen. And then, I don't know if I said this, but her friend Fiona was also pregnant the entire time, and her water breaks in the middle of the restaurant in front of like all these people. And it's like this whole dramatic thing of like, her water broke, and I'm like, oh my god, get this girl to a hospital, bitch. At the hospital, Clementine is with their other work friend Juliet, and throughout the book it was we kind of see Juliet, who has this like on and off relationship with this man who the girls disagree with, and they just don't like him in general, but they always just kind of supported her and were there for her. So the boyfriend is like a shitty person. He's this musician, and Juliet finds a picture of him kissing a fan, and she tries to make an excuse for him like she had previously, like all these other times. And Clementine is honest with her and tells her that Rob is a dick, basically, and that she needs to dump him because she deserves better. And as she is telling Juliet this, Clementine also just kind of realizes that she also deserves better in life, more than a desk job and spreadsheets and then planning someone else's like adventures out for them. So she realizes that she is also unhappy in her life. So the next day she hands in her resignation to Rhonda. And then at lunch with her parents, she is scared to tell them that she quit her job out of fear that they will be disappointed in her. But it turns out that it's the opposite, and they want her to kind of find a life for herself where she is not relying on other people's opinions and anything like that. And it's a really nice moment, and it's kind of like her realizing that she can live her life without anybody's expectations like holding over her, and that she can just kind of go off and live her life however she wants. So she comes back to the apartment and Iwan is there, and she finally tells him the truth about the apartment and how it is magic. So they kind of decide to like say goodbye in this timeline, basically, I guess. And they kiss goodbye, and as he is leaving, she realizes that she loves him. And then the door opens again afterwards, and she thinks that it's him, but it's actually her aunt that opens the door. And we don't really see a scene with her aunt or anything that happens like with that reunion, basically. And I was a little bit disappointed because, I mean, we see scenes with the aunt in the past when she was still alive, basically. I mean, she is alive like in this timeline, but I don't know. I would have really liked to have seen a scene between current timeline Clementine and the aunt still being alive, because I mean, she was such an important figure in her life, and it would have been maybe nice to see them have like an emotional reunion, maybe like have the aunt give her like some advice or something. I don't know. I don't know if Ashley did like bonus scenes or anything like that, but I don't know. I would have liked to have seen something else. And I think it was an interesting choice for her to not put a scene there, but it's her book. I just have to live with it and suck it up. I'll make one up in my mind, I guess, or something. And so after that, it is Clementine's birthday in her like real timeline, and she is at the steps of the Met, which is something that she does every year, and she is with her friends Fiona and Drew. And then Drew tells Clementine that she has a letter from her aunt Annalie that she had thrown away, and she hands it to her, and it is this travel guide for Iceland, which was a trip that she was planning for both of them to take in the future. And then Iwan shows up with a bouquet of sunflowers and tells her happy birthday, and that he remembered that she had told him at one point that that's what she does every year for her birthday, but that he had never kind of tried to find her. But he does, and it's very cute. So they head back to his restaurant, and then it's completely different from how it was at the soft opening. The atmosphere is different, the furniture is different, and he tells her that he had set a table for her that was always going to be just reserved for her, and he had told her like when they first met that he was going to do that, but the fact that he actually did it, I thought it was really cute. And then he thanks her for making him remember like kind of why he loved what he did, and why he needed to do it this way. So he confesses to her that he is in love with her, and that he, even though he loved the woman in the apartment that he met, that he somehow loves this woman that is in front of him even more. So they go back to the apartment again, and it is implied that they have sex again. So after that, it's the epilogue, and it's basically just them packing up the apartment and moving somewhere else, I think. And we don't really get to see them as a couple in the end, which was a little bit disappointing to me. But I mean, that's basically how the book ends, and I don't know, I really liked it. I thought it was really cute, and I really liked just their relationship and their connection. I thought that they had this beautiful, honest, real, and just raw connection, and that they just understood each other so deeply there were some parts that I maybe would have liked to have been explored more, like I said with the aunt, a little bit more, just that whole a scene with her or something, I don't know. And then maybe them actually as a couple a little bit more, I don't know. But I did really enjoy it. I don't think I liked it as much as the Dead Romantics, because that one I gave it 5 stars. And this one I think I gave like 4 stars on my Goodreads. But I did like it. So I know that Ashley Poston is coming out with another book soon. So I am excited. Like I said, I might try and get tickets to see if I can meet her at this book signing. But we'll see if I can or not. But yeah, I don't know. I like this book. It was just something about her writing is just so cozy and comforting to me. And she writes beautifully, I think. And I'm excited to see what she comes out with next. Yeah, if you enjoyed this episode, I have all of my social media linked below. If you want to follow me, you can, if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. I have TikTok, Instagram. Follow the podcast on any podcasting platform that you have. And leave a review if you want. That would really help me a lot. Like I said, I'm just starting. But yeah, it would really help. And I would really appreciate it too. As far as next week, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do. I mean, I have an idea, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish it. I'm going to try. Just because I really want to. I want to do a TV show next, just because I haven't done one. And I know what I want to do, but I need to see if I can rewatch and do everything before next week. But if not, I might do like another book. I have like another one in the pipeline. It's the second ACOTAR book. I mean, I have that like pretty much ready. I just need to do like finalizing and record for that because I already read it. So it's in the pipeline basically. But I really want to do this TV show, so I'm going to try my hardest. I'm not going to say what yet, just because I'm doing all of the seasons in preparation for new season coming out, if that gives a hint of anything. And as far as TV shows, I don't know if I'm going to split them into 2 parts, because I don't want to make episodes like too absurdly long. But I don't know. I'm gonna see how it works out. And so yeah, thank you so much if you enjoyed this episode. Like I said, do not forget to like, subscribe, leave a review, follow me on social media, all that good stuff for any updates or just clips or anything if you want just support. And yeah, if you haven't already, check out my other episodes. I have 4 episodes out already and everything's posted. So yeah, thank you so much, and I will see you next week. Bye.